And first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Mürce Ergün and Dr. Hossein Davoudi for their invitation to give a presentation in this our online bioarchaeology lectures. So I am specialized in Eurasian archaeology, and today I will talk about my work in Qatna in Syria. Firstly, I will briefly outline the geographical and chronological context and present the site of Mishrifeh Qatna. Secondly, I will give the general trends in animal exploitation during the major period of the occupation of the site. Thirdly, I will talk about animals in Qatna funerary context. And finally, I will present the find of elephant bones in the royal palace. So, the site of Michrifeh Qatna is located in western central Syria on the edge of the steppe on a major tributary of the middle Orontes River. The first short-lived occupation of the site dates back to the second half of the fourth millennium BC, late Chalcolithic period. The site was re-established in the early Bronze Age around 2800 BC and continued until the Iron Age. In the Middle Age, around 2000 BC, it became the capital of a regional kingdom in the central and southern Levant. In the 15th century, Qatna lost its hegemony and came under the authority of Mitanni, then Egypt, before being destroyed by the Hittites at the end of the 4th century BC. After its destruction, the city was reduced in size before being abandoned at the end of the late Bronze Age, and it was reoccupied in the Iron Age too until its destruction by the Assyrian So the site constitutes a rather flat tell situated about 18 kilometers northeast of Homs, near the modern village of Al-Michrifeh. After its foundation during the early Bronze Age III, Mishrifeh has developed into a center with urban character and function. Between 1999 and 2010, the site was excavated by 3 teams. One Syrian, led by Michel Al-Maqdissi, one Italian, led by Daniele Morandi, one German, led by Peter Pfälzner. Before presenting some of the results of my analysis on this fauna, I would like to thank the director of the various missions, Michel Maqdissi, Daniele Morandi, and Peter Pfälzner, who proposed or agreed that I study the animal remains from their excavations. The map shows the different areas excavated and the major period of occupation. I have put some ideas of references on the right. So the ABA, the early Bronze Age IV occupation, extends over the Acropolis and represent around, I don't know if you can see my, no, probably not. So it represents in the early Bronze Age IV around 25 hectares. At the beginning of the Middle Bronze Age, the city expanded to the lower city, the lower part, and covered an area of 110 hectares. And the lower city and the Acropolis were occupied during the late Bronze Age and Iron Age until the end of the occupation of Mishrifeh. So excavation of the site, occupation levels, fillings, dumps, habitats yield many animals remain. And during some of my field work, I benefited from the help of Moussab Albasso and Joanna Shaoud, who were training in archaeology at the time. So the well-dated bone assemblages presented here come from a different sector. The early Bronze Age bones come from sector G and J. The middle Bronze Age remains come also from sector G and J. And the late Bronze Age assemblage come from sector G, where have been excavated the Royal Palace, the Royal Hypogenium, and the Tomb 7. And the other late Bronze Age assemblages come from the lower city Palace K. Then there are also assemblages from the Iron Age 1 or 2. So throughout the occupation, the site's occupation, the animal economy was based on breeding, with hunting playing no significant role. However, the farming of domestic animal varies considerably according to the major phases of the Bronze Age. Cattle and pig decline from early Bronze Age 4, middle Bronze Age 1 transition onwards. Pastoral sheep farming on the rise at the same time, to the disadvantage of goat farming. So a closer look reveals at the early Bronze 4 a diversified husbandry with mixed exploitation of sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs, with cattle and pigs representing nearly half of the livestock. So equid, donkeys, probably wild emions are present in small numbers. Dogs are also present, and the wild species are rare. Gazelle, auroch are all hunted. In the Middle Bronze Age, as we have seen, there have been a reduction in cattle and pig farming in favor of caprine farming. Hunting remained anecdotal, focusing on gazella and small mammals such as hare. Birds are recorded as waterfalls. In the late Bronze Age, there was a strong trend towards specialized pastoral livestock farming with the disappearance of pigs, the very limited contribution of cattle, and the predominance of caprines. The appearance of the horse is to be noted. And the domestic hen seems to be present. So the hunting, the bird hunting or birds trapping is much more developed than in the previous periods. Birds hunting is a feature of the late Bronze Age as Mishrifeh. It is not found in this important in any other period on the site. And we can find aquatic species, steppe species, wood and tree species, and also open environment species. So back to the pig and back to the decline and or disappearance of pig on Mishrifeh during the Bronze Age. Regional comparison shows that in terms of presence or absence of pigs at different levels, Mishrifeh is therefore part of a regional phenomenon. As you can see on the map, In the early Bronze Age, pigs were found throughout the Levant. So that are the black dots. There shows a pig with more than the site with more than 5% pigs remains on the total number of domestic animals. So in the Middle Bronze Age, pig farming developed in the southern Levant. And in the late Bronze Age, the presence of pig disappeared from the southern Levant, and pig remains are anecdotal at all sites. So this species was no longer exploited, and we can find it just in a very limited quantity in the northern zone. So in the Iron Age, the situation changed again, and pigs plays a role in the food economy on some sites. So this change in husbandry could be related to the exploitation of caprine and the needs of textile fiber. But in the late Bronze Age, there are also the phenomenon climatic and also politics that could have influenced the pig breeding at that period. So now I would like to talk about the finding of in the Qatna funerary context. So the Royal Palace of Qatna is the largest Middle Bronze Age palace in the Near East. And in 2002 and 2009, rock-cut chamber tombs were found in the basement of the palace. Those two tombs were used until the late Bronze Age and remained intact after the destruction of the palace. They were built in the Middle Bronze Age. Both graves contain a lot of remains of human individuals of both sexes and all age groups. And most of the bones were found mixed together and more or less heavily fragmented with animals' bones. So the Royal Hypogeum, so tomb 6, is located beneath the northwest wing of the Royal Palace. It was discovered at the depth of 12 meters below the palace. And the precious grave goods and the integration in the palace architecture suggests that members of the royal family were buried inside. So faunal remains were found in the access corridor, in the antechamber, and in the hypogeum. But I will just present here the faunal remain from the hypogeum. So just to have a look inside this 4-chamber tomb, all the chamber delivered faunal remains, but most of the fauna was found in chamber 1 and chamber 2. So the study of those faunal remains indicate the preference of sheep in the grave good. It represents more than 60% of all the bones, and the selection of mainly the high value mid part. So you can see that the trunk, forelimb, intlib, ist were represented as well for caprines and for cattle. So the chamber shows that the sheep, caprines, because no remains of goat could be surely identified. So the remains that could be identified were all sheep. So the animals in the fourth chamber are mostly or just sheep and cattle, and there are also birds. So there are body parts of high mid value and evidence of articulated parts from the part mid value. So rib, forelimb, hindlimb, vertebrae could be probably were articulated. And in the chamber 2, there were no evidence of articulated limb bones, but of articulated extremities, carpal, tarsal bone, phalanges, caudal vertebrae. In chamber 3, there were few remains, but still body part of high mid value. And as well in chamber 4. There were also different type of birds, some complete skeleton of geese and pigeon. No extremity part of cattle, no phalanges, and all age classes were represented, adult, sub-adult. In chamber 1, 10 talus of Mesopotamian fallow deer were also found. Some pieces of tortoise shell, a part of the skeleton of a weasel, and the only bone fragment of bone fish not identified. So the condition of the surface of the bone was rather poor, but some cut marks could be observed, and mainly on sheep bones. So we have evidence of butchery and meat consumption because of two types of cut marks. Traces of disarticulation, they are located at the joints, and traces of meat removal, they are located on the diaphysis of the long bones. So we could, according to the distribution of the skeletic part, we could remark that there was a different treatment in butchery for cattle and sheep. Obviously, the sheep was coming inside the hypogeum as whole animal, dead or alive, we cannot say. But the cattle probably came as meat cutters. So we could think about the use of the rooms, or how was the butchers the sheep, because sheep were coming probably complete inside the tomb. And in the chamber 2, the ossuary, so-called ossuary, we find butchery waste. That means the extremity of the limb and the parts that are not that doesn't have meat. And we could notice that there were no metapodials, and the question is if those parts were used for as raw material for craft activity in the town. According to the way of disarticulated the body. It seems that the main chamber 1 and the chamber 3 were a place where for food offering and probably where there have been some meals, yes. And after probably all the bones were bring to the chamber 2. Probably no animals' bones were going outside the tomb, but they were just thrown in the chamber 2. So now I will talk about the tomb 6. It was discovered in 2009 below the northwest wing of the Royal Palace. There are two chambers, so a view of one, the south chamber. So the quantity of bone remains in those two burial chambers was really impressive. There were the rich inventory of objects were dated by from the Middle Bronze Age 2A and 2B, and the tomb was in use up to the late Bronze Age. So animals' remains were also found among the numerous human bones, most of which represent secondary deposits stored one by one in wooden sheds. So unfortunately, the animals' remains could not be studied during the two excavation campaigns, 2009 and 2010, during which Tomb 7 was excavated. Then, unluckily, from 2011 onwards, the beginning of armed conflict in Syria prevented access to the material until today. Nevertheless, owing to the almost exhaustive graphic survey and photographic coverage of the funerary levels during excavation in the field, it was possible to adopt a rather singular archaeological approach using these documents. Therefore, the analysis of the animal deposits I show you now was carried out directly on images by very carefully scrutinizing more than 500 documents to identify animal bones among the human remains. And I was helped for that by the anthropologist. We were working very close together. So the case in these two rooms chamber, there were deposits of in-limb of sheep. There were more than 40 fragments of femur, distal or proximal. That's why they could be identified. And probably there were just sheep also, because that was the only species that could be determined on the bones so far. And it was possible to count between 12 and 20 adults and sub-adult individuals. And one cattle, there were bones of cattle, but so just one sub-adult could be counted. So we can see again there is a clear selection of body parts with high meat value. To summarize, those animals remain in the funerary context of Qatna are rather characteristic of Middle Late Bronze Age funerary assemblages with a specific selection of sheep and cattle. And there is no evidence of goats, pig, or wild species except birds. Food offerings are mainly made up of prime quality meat cuts, and it seems that part of the animal carcass was consumed by the living during funerary rituals. So in the royal hypogeum, no visible differences between funerary and domestic butchery. There is a clear selection of relatively young animals, and many birds remains. In Tomb 7, the preferential and systematic deposition of the rear part, the saddle and the leg, is a very specific feature of this tomb. The animal bones found in or near the place were never in their primary location, unlike those found inside or near the wooden boxes. The animal offerings were probably already inside the boxes when those were brought to Tomb 7 with the human bones, because it was a secondary deposition of the human bone and also very probably of the animal's bones. So animals and humans were treated somehow in the same way. So during I want also to talk now about special founding that are the animal bones, the elephant bones of the royal palace. So during the excavation campaign of 2008 at Mishrifeh, 7 bone fragments well preserved were retrieved in 2 different rooms of the royal palace of Qatna, dated from the late Bronze Age. So we are in the second half of the second millennium BC. And 2 more bones were found in 2009 in room DF. So the 2 rooms belong to the western part of the palace. This part, according to observation on the architecture, has probably suffered from an earthquake in the late Bronze Age. The rooms on the ground floor of the palace were filled with earth, probably in order to stabilize the building. The field did not contain any archaeological material whatsoever. There were only the elephant bones in the back, partly resting on the ground. So the bones seems to have been deposited there before the filling of the rooms. So there some the picture of those bones. So it's mixed assemblage, I will say, with a right scapula, a left humerus, a right tibia, fragment of sacrum, fragment of pelvis, lumbar vertebra, thoracic vertebra, and cervical vertebra. There are no traces of human activity, no disarticulation, no meat removal, no combustion, no carnivore marks, no scavenging activity. The distal epiphysis of the humerus is fixed to the diaphysis. The proximal part is unfused and missing. The proximal part of the right tibia shows clear suture, and the distal part is broken. For the vertebra, the annular epiphysis of the vertebrae are not fused to the body and they are missing. So there is a question about the species of this elephant, knowing that there are 2 current elephant species in the world, the African elephant and the Asiatic elephant. Those two species can be distinguished more easily on the molars, but it's more complicated to distinguish them in long in limb bones, because no real work has been done to try to find discrimination character in the morphology. I have worked on some modern collection in Paris, in Tervuren, in Lyon, in Bruxelles, and I could notice that the Qatna specimen has elephas morphology. The supramatus process, that is the number one on the picture on the left part of the dia. So this supramatus process is less distally oriented in elephas than in Loxodonta, and that is the case in the specimen of Qatna, and it is also thicker in elephas. So according to this character, it's possible to say that this scapula has elephas morphology. I have done also some remarks on the humerus. I will not show it to you, but now, but the humerus has also characteristic, elephas characteristic. And just to have a short blick on the morphometric analysis, the measurement of the scapula of Qatna shows that it belongs to a very big animal, bigger than the modern comparison of Asiatic elephant and of African elephant from the Museum of Lyon, Bruxelles, Paris, and Tervuren. So, according to the dimension and the epiphysis stages of the bone of rooms DD and DF, the remains of the elephant seems to be at least coming from one adult male elephant, aged at death between 30 and 35 years. That means biologically subadult, but having probably is a maximal 8 and over 3 meters tall. So those specimens show that we have an elephant that is bigger as a modern Asiatic elephant, but with the morphology of an Asiatic elephant. So what is this elephant? We know about the existence, the presence of an elephant in Near East, according to some very few iconographic documentation that show elephant with Asiatic features. One of these documents is from Egypt, and the other one is from North Iraq. And there are some few texts talking or describing or mentioning elephant. Steles from the 8th dynasty in Egypt, the king Thutmose III's elephant hunt in Syria, and in Mesopotamia, some lexical lists already from the 3rd millennium BC, some mythological texts at the end of the 3rd millennium BC, and Assyrian royal inscription from the Iron Age. So because of those documentation, we were aware of the presence of the elephant in Near East, and also there are a lot of bones and molar finding in Mesopotamia and the Levant. And obviously, the presence of the elephant is to be found at the beginning of the second millennium BC, in the beginning of the Middle Bronze Age, and a lot of bones remains come from site dated from the end of the second millennium and the first millennium BC. So the late Bronze Age and Iron Age. So back to the elephant of Qatna, the question, one of the questions, there are many questions and very few answers, I have to say. No sure answer. I will just come on two. First question is this elephant wild or not? And I will not answer the question. Is it a property of the king? We could think about the zoological part of half-free elephants in the swamps of the Orontes. Or is that elephant marron back to the wild? We know about the Thutmosis text that the Egyptian king has exterminated. So, as he say, 120 elephants in the Sea of Ni, that means near the Orontes Valley. So there must have been elephant in the wild, in the area. And so what is the deposit of elephant bones in the room DD and DF in Qatna? Is that a prestigious hunt of the king of Qatna? The hunt of 3 elephants in the swamps of the Orontes, and then part of a body brought to the palace as offerings, ritual purposes? Or is that a scavenger act? Bones of a dead elephant from the swamps of the Orontes brought to the palace, also for offerings or ritual purposes? Or a property of the king? Deposit of bone of a royal elephant offering commemoration ritual purposes. According to the conservation state of the bones, the fact that there are no the epiphysis of the humerus, proximal humerus, or of the vertebra, I think that is more a scavenger act. That means that those bones were found on the ground in the area of Qatna and brought back to the palace as a very special object, because they are very big, they are enormous. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And I will stop now here. I want to make a lot of thanks to all the people with whom I have worked in Qatna, particularly the Syrian colleagues and friends. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that this has been informative for you and that you could follow my French accent. Thank you very much.